All right, today we're digging into a really fascinating Supreme Court case. And believe it or not, it all comes down to a dog, a front porch, and one of the absolute biggest questions we have in privacy law.
So let's just get right to it. Here's the core question that made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Can the police walk a highly trained drug-sniffing dog right up to your front door to, have a sniff around, all without a warrant? It sounds simple, but the answer really defines this critical line between public space and the privacy of your own home.
So, how did we even get here? Well, it all kicked off with what seemed like a pretty standard police investigation.
Okay, so back in 2006, police in Miami-Dade get this unverified tip, right? It says marijuana is being grown at a guy named Jardines' house. So what do? A detective grabs his drug-sniffing dog, a canine named Frankie, and heads over. They walk up to the front porch and boom, Frankie sits down. Now that's his trained signal. It means he smells narcotics. That single alert from Frankie was pretty much the whole reason they got a search warrant, and that warrant led to Jardines' arrest. But here's the million-dollar question. Was that initial sniff on the porch even legal to begin with?
And to answer that question, we have to talk about one of the most important protections we have against the government just showing up and searching our stuff, the Fourth Amendment.
The Fourth Amendment is basically our constitutional shield against unreasonable searches. But the key word here, for this case, is houses. The home has always been given the highest level of protection. But that begs the question, where does your house actually end? Is it just the four walls?
And that's where this really important legal term comes in, curtilage. The easiest way to think about it is like an invisible privacy bubble around your home. It's the area that's super closely linked to the home itself. We're talking about your yard and definitely your front porch. And here's the kicker. Legally, the curtilage gets the exact same Fourth Amendment protection as the inside of your living room.
And check out this quote from Justice Scalia, who wrote the majority opinion. It's so telling. He basically says, the front porch isn't just a slab of concrete. No, it's an extension of the home. It's a constitutionally protected space where life happens. And that idea, it is absolutely central to understanding this entire case.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's break down the winning argument. We'll start with the majority opinion, which really boiled down to a very old, very simple idea. Trespass.
Here's the bottom line from Justice Scalia. He says that the second the police brought what he called a super-sensitive instrument, which in this case was Frankie the dog, onto the porch to investigate, they were conducting a search. It's not about what the dog smelled. The crucial part is where the dog was standing when he smelled it.
This really gets to the heart of Scalia's idea of an implied license. I mean, think about your own front door. You give people an implied permission, right? The mail carrier, a neighbor, trick-or-treaters, they can all come up and knock. But you have not given them a license to conduct an investigation, and you certainly haven't invited them to bring a trained police dog to explore your porch. Scalia's point is that the police went way beyond that normal social invitation.
So for the majority, this whole thing was actually pretty simple. It wasn't about the dog's incredible sense of smell. It was about the officer's feet. The moment they physically stepped onto that protected area, the porch, with the goal of gathering information, it became a search. End of story.
But of course, not everyone on the court saw it that way, not even close. So let's flip to the other side, the dissenting opinion, and see how they built a completely different case.
Justice Alito, who wrote the dissent, really came out swinging. He basically said the majority's focus on trespass was, and I'm paraphrasing here, a fanciful mistake. He argued it just wasn't grounded in reality. For him, the real question wasn't about property lines. It was all about our expectation of privacy.
And this is the absolute core of the dissent. Alito's logic goes like this. If smells are coming out of your house, wafting into the public air where anyone could smell them, they aren't private anymore. You just can't claim a privacy right in something that has already escaped your property. It doesn't matter if it's a person's nose or a dog's nose that detects it.
Alito also argued that a dog sniff is totally unique, that it isn't even really a search in the traditional sense. First, it's minimally intrusive, right? They're not opening your mail or going through your drawers. And second, and this was his killer point, a dog sniff only detects illegal activity. It only alerts to contraband. The dog isn't telling the police if you're watching TV or making dinner. So, because it reveals zero lawful private information, Alito argued there's no way it could violate a reasonable expectation of privacy.
So there you have it. Two powerful, totally competing arguments. One is all about physical trespass onto your property. The other is all about your reasonable expectation of privacy. So, who won?
How did the Supreme Court actually rule?
And wow, it could not have been closer. The final vote was 5-4. This was no landslide. It really shows you just how deeply divided the justices were on this fundamental question of where to draw that constitutional line.
In the end, the ruling came down on the side of physical trespass. Justice Scalia's majority opinion became the law of the land. So, the final answer is yes. Bringing a drug-sniffing dog onto a person's front porch to investigate is an unconstitutional search without a warrant.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why does this case from years ago still matter? Well, it's because the court drew a very clear, very physical line in the sand around our homes. It basically said that the curtilage, that front porch, that yard, it's not a free-for-all zone for police. If they want to cross that line to conduct an investigation, they're going to need a warrant.
And that really leaves us with a huge question for today, right? This case was about a dog's nose. But what about all the new technology? We've got thermal imaging that can see heat through walls, high-tech cameras, surveillance drones flying overhead. The big question now is, if the police can investigate your home without physically trespassing, is it still a search? This case drew a line at the porch, but the bigger battle over defining privacy in the modern age, that is far from over.